Okay, so we're going to have a little lesson here on pH. So make sure you have your notebooks out. And actually, no, you're answering questions on a sheet for this as we go along. So here we go. Now, pH actually stands for, I believe, percent hydrogen. So the P is lowercase and the H is capital for hydrogen. So it's really a measure of the hydrogen ion concentration of an aqueous solution, aqueous meaning something that's water-based. So, everything that you everything that you drink on any regular basis. So obviously water, but milk and soda and any juices or sports drinks or whatever, those are all water-based, so they're going to have a pH. If you have something that's not water-based, like oil, for example, that doesn't have a pH because it's not oil-based. So trying to figure out the pH of that is inappropriate because it's not water-based. So anyway, let's move on. Okay, because of all this, the aqueous solution and the fact that it's water-based, we need to think about water a little bit more because there are some properties of water that make it do what it does. So let's keep going. So first of all, what's the chemical formula for water? You all know this, so just write it down really quick. And H2O it is. Great. Doesn't that glass of water look really, really good? I might have to stop and get a drink of water. Okay, so the question then is, thinking back to what we've done earlier in the unit, what kind of bond do hydrogen and oxygen form? So think about this, think about your coloring sheet, think about your notes on ionic and covalent bonding. So what do you think? The answer is, it would be a covalent bond because both the hydrogen and the oxygen are both nonmetals. So covalent bond, if you remember correctly, the covalent bonds are the bonds that form when things share, and the ultimate goal of sharing is to have everybody become stable, which means a filled outer energy level. So they bond covalently. So knowing that, what does the LED structure of water look like then? So H2O, so there's two H's and an O. O, oxygen, has 6 valence electrons. Each of the hydrogens has 1, so we can find the hydrogen way over on the left-hand side of the table, and oxygen's over on the right, and call them 16. All right, so see if you get this, and covalently bonded, and there it is. All right, so again, I showed the original valence electron for each of the hydrogens as a different shape than the oxygens. So there it is. However, that's not exactly true. There's something a little bit different about water and other molecules as well. So we need to talk about it a bit more. So here's that same Lewis electron dot for water. And water is often called the universal solvent because it's really good at dissolving things. Some things dissolve really quickly, like salt. Other things dissolve much more slowly, like, I don't know, something that might be iron, for example, that you might find on a ship that's sunken at sea, for example. But anyway, so things dissolve at different rates. But anyway, the reason it's so good at dissolving things is because it's polar. And if you look, let's see. Yeah, so polar simply means it has 2 separate ends. So you could say the polar regions of the Earth are on 2 separate ends. Polar, and when you think of a magnet, it has a positive and negative, or positive and negative end, or north and south end. So if you look up at the Lewis electron dot structure, you can see that the side where the hydrogen hang out is actually positive, and the side where the oxygen is more sort of by itself is negative. And we'll talk about why that is in class. And I have this great demo with a balloon and a stream of water, and remind me to do that in class. All right, so water is a polar molecule, which gives it some properties that make it critical to dissolving things, and for pH and for just how we use it in life. All right, so polar molecules behave a bit like ionic compounds in that when they're put into water, now we're talking about water, they dissociate into ions. Dissociate meaning they break apart. So water dissociates or yields hydrogen ions, which is the H+, and hydroxide ions, which is the OH-. And when things dissociate, whether it's water or something else, any ionic compound will actually do this, it dissociates into ions. And these ions are called electrolytes when they're in an aqueous solution. And you've probably heard the term electrolytes with reference to like Gatorade and that kind of thing, and you know, the sports drinks where you want to reclaim some electrolytes you lost when you were you know, playing your sport. The thing about electrolytes, though, is that because they're charged particles, they actually allow an aqueous solution or a water-based solution to conduct electricity. And you say, well, yeah, but doesn't water conduct electricity? Again, there's a demo that I'll do for you, I forgot to write that here, to show you how, in fact, pure water or distilled water really doesn't conduct electricity very well. But when you're in a bathtub and the toaster falls in, well, that's a totally different story, because now you have all kinds of salts from the surface of your body and all that other stuff. So anyway, we can talk more about that in class. So electrolytes are ions in an aqueous solution that allows it to conduct electricity, and we'll be doing a little bit more with those later. So, however, water molecules, unlike some others, really don't like to be dissociated. They don't really want to be apart. So if you look at the equation again, you have H2O yields H plus and OH minus, but because the H plus and the OH minus are actually, they're opposite charges, they're attracted to one another, and so they have a pretty strong tendency to actually go back together again to form water. And this is indicated by an arrow going in the opposite direction as well. So water can yield hydrogen ions and hydroxide ions, and hydroxide ions plus hydrogen ions will also yield water. So this particular equation takes place in both directions at the same time. As a water molecule splits, the two ions will come together and form another bonded water molecule. Okay, so if we look at the LEDs for everything, here is our water molecule showing the two polar ends, and that's going to yield hydrogen ions. So we have the hydrogen ions with the positive charge. So what does that mean happen to the hydrogen if it has a positive charge? Right, it had to actually lose an electron. And we have the OH minus, and it's minus because it has this one extra electron that, in fact, came from that hydrogen. So those are the LEDs for water, hydrogen, and hydroxide ions. Oh, and it also takes place in both directions. All right, so taking a look at this equation, this is actually already balanced. So the ratio is 1 to 1 to 1. All right, so, and it makes sense that when a single water molecule splits, it forms one hydrogen ion and one hydroxide ion. And you can look at those, and there's two H's on that side and one O, and on the other side there are two H's and an O. So it's balanced perfectly. And when this splits, equal amounts of these are formed. All right? So, if you add something to this water to make a solution, and the thing that you're adding increases the number of hydrogen ions, then the concentration of hydrogen ions will actually go up. Just as a quick note here, notice that the way I drew the hydrogen ion here, it has the H plus, and both the H and the plus are within the bracket. When you see that, you actually read that as concentration of hydrogen ions. So it's different than the ionic bond in that the charge is inside the bracket instead of out, but so it's a little confusing, but you'll get it. The thing though is, and I'll do a demo for this too, if you add something to this water that increases the number of hydroxide ions, what's going to happen there is actually the concentration of hydrogen ions will go down because they'll start glomming on to those extra hydroxide ions, or OH minuses. And I'll show you how that works with a little manipulative thing. All right, so just a reminder, we'll jump back to the beginning of the slideshow here, and the pH is defined as the measure of the hydrogen ion concentration. Notice how hydrogen ion concentration is written of an aqueous solution. All right, so how do you figure out what the pH of something is? Well, if you are given the hydrogen ion concentration, you can look at it, and the hydrogen ion concentration is actually really small. It's a very small number, so it's going to be, and it's going to be written in scientific notation, and the exponent is going to be negative because it's such a small amount. So if you're given the hydrogen ion concentration, if you look at the times 10 to the exponent, and the exponent will be negative, whatever that exponent is, take the negative away, and that's going to be your pH. Now, mathematically, this doesn't make sense, but there is a mathematical way to figure this out, and it has to do with logs and things, so we're not going to get into it, but it's just as easy to look at the concentration and do it this way. So we know that the hydrogen ion concentration is equal to the exponent without the negative, so let's see how this goes. So let's read this the way it's supposed to be read. If the hydrogen ion concentration is equal to 1.0 times 10 to the negative fourth moles per liter, so those are the units that you would use to indicate the concentration of something. So there's this many moles of hydrogen in a liter of the solution, whatever it is. Then what's the pH? Well, I come over here, I look at the 10 to the negative exponent. The exponent is 4. I get rid of the negative sign because I don't need it, and the pH is 4. So that's all I do. I look at the exponent, I eliminate the negative sign, and that's what the pH is. Right? If the hydrogen ion concentration is times 10 to the negative 13 moles per liter, then you're using the same technique, and the pH is actually 13. Oh, good, my phone's ringing. Hold on. Okay, so I'm not going to start over. So anyway, then this next one is the hydrogen ion concentration is equal times 10 to the negative 7 moles per liter, and then the pH is going to be 7. Now, think about this for a second. Which one of these concentrations is actually the largest or has the most hydrogen ions? Is it to the negative 4, the negative or the negative 13? Obviously, it's not the negative 7 because this is, that's in the middle. So which one's a bigger number, negative 4 or negative 13? Well, it's negative 4, right? So negative 4 means there are in fact more hydrogen ions, which in fact makes it a lower pH. You see that? So that's why if something becomes more acidic, it actually has a lower pH because we're just looking at the opposite of the exponent. You don't have to know that, but I just think it's kind of cool. All right, the pH scale you've probably heard about, going from 0 to 14. Anything less than 7 is an acid, 7 is the neutral center, and anything above a 7 is a base. So just some common everyday things. Gastric juice, which would be your stomach juices, and you've heard of stomach acid and stuff. So that's really quite acidic, which is why, when you throw up, it really hurts because it's all that acid is coming up through your throat, which is not used to having all that acid there. Vinegar, which you use in salad dressings or on French fries, I guess some people do that, is also fairly acidic. Cow's milk is slightly acidic, but really close to the neutral range. Drinking water, depending on if it's well water or processed water from a town, or what kind of rock surrounds it in the ground, whatever is going to influence the pH of your drinking water. Blood is also neutral and has a really, really narrow range, and there's all kinds of things that go on in your body to keep your blood pH within that really small range. Saliva is also pretty narrow, not as narrow as blood, but just sort of a neutral pH. Bile, which is another body thing produced by the liver, we'll go back to throwing up again. If you end up really throwing up and then you get to the dry heaves that green stuff that comes out is actually bile, which is used to help digest fats in your body. Nevertheless, baking soda has is a weak base, and milk of magnesia, and I forget why people take that. But anyway, it's upset stomach, I guess. And ammonia, which is a cleaner, is a kind of a different kind of base, but we're not going to get into that. All right, so what is an acid? What is a base? An acid is a substance that yields, remember yields is the arrow in the balanced equation, that yields hydrogen ions, H pluses, in solution. And it has a pH of less than 7. Okay, so here's an example. Carbonic acid is something that your body produces from your cells, and it's how the carbon dioxide gets to your lungs to breathe out. But nevertheless, so carbonic acid yields hydrogen ions, so we automatically know that it's an acid, and bicarbonate ions. Okay, so there's an example. So if you didn't even know what this was, and you saw yields H+, you automatically know that it's an acid. A base is any substance that yields hydroxide ions, or the OH- ions, in a solution, and it has a pH of greater than 7. And an example of that is sodium hydroxide, which is used as an industrial cleaner, yields sodium ions and hydroxide ions. Again, you could not even know what these are. You look at this, you see, hydroxide ions are produced, so I know that it has to be a base. All right. Now, there are these other things called indicators, and if you have a fish tank or a pool or a hot tub, or I don't know what else you would have, one of the things that you have to test and keep within a certain range is the pH. So you might have a liquid that you use that turns a certain color, or these little pieces of test strips that have these little squares on them that change color. So there's all kinds of indicators, actually, for all kinds of different things. We're going to focus on the pH ones at the moment. And the indicator that we're going to be focusing on is called bromothymol blue, and we're going to use this in a lab that we do in a week or so. So anyway, bromothymol blue is the one that I need you to be really aware of what happens. In an acid solution, bromothymol blue is actually yellow. And in a neutral solution, bromothymol blue is actually green. And in a basic solution, bromothymol blue is actually blue. And if you think about this, it makes complete sense. In an acid, you've got a lot of H pluses. In a base, you have very few H pluses and a whole lot more OH minus, the hydroxide ions. And in a neutral solution, you have equal amounts of acid in a base, and yellow and blue together. What do they make? What color? Green. There it is. Okay, so we have a bunch of kind of cool demos to show you in class. And remember, there is an open notes quiz on this stuff on the due date. And feel free to go back and look at anything you didn't get. Mark down any questions that you have or things that weren't clear, and we'll go over them in class. All right, I better go see who called me a few minutes ago. All right, bye.